Hello everyone and welcome to the podcast Travel EmOcean. Everything about traveling, diving and emotions around the ocean. How these topics work together, you will find out. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the podcast Travel EmOcean. Today, Jonathan and I will discuss a question we get quite often. What is the best time to go diving in the Galapagos Islands? I will start the topic and Jonathan will give you then a little bit more insight. For me, the best time is between June and October, as the chances to see whale sharks are definitely higher. And also, the schools of hammerheads tend to be much bigger in this period. So, Jonathan, why is that like that?
Well, we have two very distinct seasons in the Galapagos. One is the cool season, which generally runs from June till the end of November, let's say possibly the beginning of December. And then the warm, or sometimes you could call it hot season, which is from December, January, and runs all the way till April, May. Now this varies every single year, and that's why we don't tend to run trips at the early part of the cool season or the late part of the cool season, because sometimes it's cooler, sometimes it's warmer. Just depends on the ocean currents. But that is the key to everything. It's because of the ocean currents, very specifically those cold currents that are coming up the Peru coast, probably all the way from Antarctica, bringing in very cold water, very rich, nutrient-rich water, which is highly productive. When that mixes with the warm waters from the north, then you get an explosion in marine life at a very, very low level. So we're talking about phytoplankton, zooplankton. Because of the levels of productivity and the amount of food that is available, you obviously get an influx of the bigger species. So a lot of the sharks, the whale sharks obviously at that time, mantas, turtles, rays, a number of the whale species, for example, come in around those periods. So those two distinct periods mean that you get influx of different animals at different times of the year.
Mm-hmm. So yes, most of our videos and photos are obviously taken in the cold season between June and September. So if I would go as a diver in, for example, January in the warm season, I mean, it's still that we see things. What would I see, Jonathan?
You still see a great number of different species. So it is possible to see a lot of the pelagic, what we call big life, hammerhead sharks. You'll see turtles, obviously the sea lions that are resident all year round, very, very playful. Galapagos in the, what you might call the off-season, is probably better to dive in than 90% of the world's destinations during their high season. You'll see more species in Galapagos on a bad day than you see in most dive sites around the world on the very best day. So Galapagos is an exciting place to dive at any time of the year. You will see probably hammerheads if you go up to Wolf and Darwin in January, February, March, but you probably won't see them in the huge schools that we expect to see in the cool season. You might even see a whale shark. We have whale sharks turning up, individual sharks turning up all year round. So there are sightings in January and February, but it might be a single individual, and the probability, of course, of seeing them is much, much lower. However, if that is the time of the year that you have available to travel, I would say go and travel anyway, because you'll have a fantastic time. But if specifically you want to see the big life and you want to see it in big numbers, it's during the cool season and during those specific months.
So when I understand it right, in the colder season, the productivity in the water is higher. So I assume that the visibility is then less like in the warmer season, right?
Yep, that's absolutely true. And that's one of the things you have to take into account. It's your 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The warmer season, the hot season, tends to give you better visibility because the water's clearer, because there are fewer nutrients, but because there are fewer nutrients in the water, lower productivity, and therefore fewer big schools, and a lot of the big life is absent. So yeah, you've got to weigh it up. If those are the months that you have to go, there are pros and cons for each time of the year.
So what is better and worse? Because I was mainly obviously diving in the months June to October, and I would say we had quite a good visibility. How much do you have?
Again, it's all relative. So if you've only dived in places like the Caribbean or the Red Sea, where you tend to have 20, 30 meters, so we're talking 80 to 100 feet of visibility, then you might be disappointed in Galapagos in certain areas during the cold season because the visibility does drop. It can be quite low in Galapagos during the cold season if you get very, very nutrient-rich waters and all of a sudden a plankton bloom, then you could have visibility which is between 5 and 10 meters. But frequently during the cold season, you can get visibility 15, 20, 25 meters. It's a question of luck, and that's part and parcel of the experience. But again, I have to emphasize that if you want to increase your probability and your chances of seeing those, like Africa's Big Five, then it's the cold season.
One of my other favorite animals in the Galapagos is the marine iguana. So what are marine iguanas and, for example, penguins doing during the warm season?
Well, that's a good question. People don't associate penguins with warm water, but both the penguin and the marine iguana are endemic species. That means that they're unique to Galapagos. They're year-round residents, so they don't leave the Galapagos no matter what the conditions are. They do have a much tougher time, of course, during the warm season in finding food. The algae that the marine iguanas tend to feed on dies out in the upper waters, so they have to dive deeper. So it's sometimes a lot easier to see them or to find them during the cool season. But they're there. Again, it's a question of chance. They can't leave the Galapagos Islands. They're adapted to those conditions. But certainly for them, the time of plenty, when you see them feeding, when you see them in bigger numbers out in the algal mats in the shallow waters around coastal Fernandina, for example, again, is during the cool season.
So when you say deeper, how much deeper? So usually in the cold season, we see them around 2-3 meters. What is in the warm season? How deep?
Well, the waters every year varies. The upper waters can go as high as 29, even up to 30 degrees. And in exceptionally warm years, which might be El Nino years, for example, and that's a topic for a whole other discussion, waters can go up to 31, 32 degrees. During the last El Nino, which was 97, 98, we were looking at marine iguanas diving as deep as 30 meters plus, 100 feet plus. So you don't see them in those shallow waters. In the normal hot season, the algae would tend to be less plentiful, let's say in the top 10, maybe top 15 meters. So they'd possibly go a little bit deeper than that. So yeah, you wouldn't see them in the shallow waters. You would have to dive a little bit deeper.
So if I would sum up the question, what is the best time to dive in Galapagos? It is between June and October because you really can see the big wildlife, whale sharks and big schools of hammerhead. If the only option is for you to go diving between January and March, I would still say go for it. Would you anything add, Jonathan?
Nope, I think that pretty much sums it up. Galapagos is one of the most amazing destinations on the planet, both on land, but of course underwater. And it doesn't matter what time of the year you go, you would have an incredible experience. But if your focus is the big life, then yes, June, July, August, September are certainly the months that you should aim for.
I hope you found some ideas or new information for you. And if you enjoyed this episode or liked the information we gave, please take the minute to subscribe to the podcast or like it. And also make sure to share the podcast and to tell all your friends and to share the information on Facebook, on Twitter, and all other social media sites. I really would appreciate your support and your feedback. So thanks again for listening to Travel EmOcean Podcast. And if you have a topic you would like me to talk about, please write me an email to info@galapagossharkdiving.com. The music for the podcast is provided by Sebastian Green. You can reach him on Instagram at SebastianG01234. Thank you all for listening and bye for now.